about a little bit of the history of Juneteenth. June 19th, 1865, Major General Gordon Granger goes into Galveston, Texas. And there was a good article from the New York Times that dealt with how most Americans don't understand the history of Juneteenth. Now, this article came out in, it was about June of 2021 when this article came out. But one of the things that people don't seem to understand, and this is why one of the reasons why it's so hard for us to get any type of reparative justice, any type of reparations, okay, any substantial type of reparations, is because Americans are very ignorant of history, okay? Americans are very ignorant of history, regardless of race or ethnicity. So there was this good article from the New York Times. Most Americans know little or nothing about Juneteenth, poll finds, and it found that 60% of Americans knew little or nothing about Juneteenth. And I would argue that most of what they think they know is false, because Juneteenth was not the last day of slavery, okay? Because June 19th, 1865, when Major General Gordon Granger delivered General Order Number 3 in Galveston, Texas, and then he and his troops of almost 2,000 Union Negro soldiers go all throughout Texas to bring Texas back into the Union, okay, because Texas had seceded from the Union. Well, the 13th Amendment is what legally frees the slaves and what legally ends chattel slavery in this country. The 13th Amendment was not ratified until December 6, 1865, when Georgia ratified the 13th Amendment. Okay, the Emancipation Proclamation did not free the slaves. That's January 1st, 1863. And we, in the class, we look at it, and I tell people to go to archives.gov and read the Emancipation Proclamation, or go to loc.gov, Library of Congress website, and read the Emancipation Proclamation, because it specifically tells you that the territories that are in rebellion, those territories that belong to the Confederacy, those slaves would be free if those territories did not come back into the Union by January 1st, 1863. But it gives exceptions. It gives exceptions to the border states, Maryland, Missouri, Kentucky, and Delaware. They were allowed to keep their slaves. Okay. Maryland did not abolish slavery until November 1864. Okay. And that had to be put on the ballot. They had to vote on that. The Emancipation Proclamation did not free the slaves. So one of the things that we do in this class, from class number 1, is dispel a lot of myths that are out here dealing with history. Okay. If you read, this is an article that we look at in the class, The Not Quite Free State, Maryland Dragged Its Feet on Emancipation During the Civil War. Now, this is from Washington Post, September 13th, 2013. Interestingly enough, September 13th is the day before September 14th, 1814, when Francis Scott Key wrote The Defense of Fort McHenry, which was a poem that became known as the Star-Spangled Banner. And you see the video that I did dealing with the Black National Anthem and the Star-Spangled Banner, how Francis Scott Key was a white supremacist slave owner who thought that African people were mentally inferior, and how the Star-Spangled Banner, the whole song is a white supremacist song, not just the third stanza. Okay. But the vote was, the final vote was 30,174 in favor of freeing the slaves to 29,799 against. November 1st, 1864, Maryland slaves were declared free only a few months before Congress would approve the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery. Now, this is almost 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. So there's a lot of this history in mainstream media that I hear being repeated during Juneteenth, all this stuff that's just false. Now, Juneteenth is very important. It's very important that Juneteenth became a federal holiday. One, that's the only federal holiday that acknowledges slavery. Okay. You do have Emancipation Day, which is April 16th. Okay. But that's recognized not as much. That's largely celebrated in Washington, D.C. Why is April 16th significant? April 16th, 1862, that's when the Compensated Emancipation Act of 1862 was signed into law by President Abraham Lincoln. It passed Congress, passed the House, passed the Senate. It was a bill sponsored by an abolitionist, Senator Henry L. Tyler, out of Massachusetts. But this bill abolishes slavery in the District of Columbia, and slaveholders in the District of Columbia were paid reparations of up to $300 for each slave that they own. Okay. And as Tremaine Lee on MSNBC talked about Thursday, February 22nd, 2024 on Alex Wagner's show, and he has a podcast dealing with reparations on MSNBC, MSNBC's website, and dealing with podcasts. You had a few, maybe 5 or 6 African Americans who owned slaves because they bought family members out of slavery in the District of Columbia, and they collected on reparations also. Now, the slaves were never, those slaves that were freed were not given reparations. Read this article here from the, this is from Senate.gov. The Zen Education Project has one, but the one from Senate.gov has more information. Okay. Senate.gov is the official website of the U.S. Senate. Landmark legislation, the District of Columbia Compensated Emancipation Act. So I hear people misstate what happened. And I hear people say, I've been on panel discussions, and, you know, I've been on, you see me on Roland Martin Unfiltered on Fridays. I've been on, it's been over 3 years. I started October 20th, 2020, and been on almost every Friday since then. I hear people say, oh, slave owners were given reparations during slavery here in the U.S. The slaves weren't given anything. Okay. This only applied to the District of Columbia. This is why we have to do more research. And this is why a lot of this stuff floating out here dealing with reparations, don't take this the wrong way. A lot of this stuff, Senator Henry L. Wilson, I should say, Senator Henry Wilson, a lot of this stuff is not going to go anywhere. Because if you're seeking a legal remedy to a historical problem, then that would imply that you understand both law and history. And unfortunately, a lot of people pushing this stuff dealing with reparations don't understand either one. And I can listen to them and tell that. A lot of stuff is not going to go anywhere. They don't know how to make legal arguments. And the other thing is, as we deal within this class, and also in the second class that I teach, dealing with history from 1800 to 1968, race-based policies are illegal at the federal level based upon Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, Section 601, non-discrimination in federally assisted programs. Nobody wants to have that conversation. Okay. But if we look at this very quickly here, landmark legislation, the District of Columbia Compensated Emancipation Act. On a visit to Washington, D.C. in 1836, the site of a slave auction held in the shadow of the Capitol, the U.S. Capitol, convinced future Senator Henry Wilson of Massachusetts to, quote, give all land to the cause of emancipation, end quote. So he's elected to the U.S. Senate in 1855. This is 6 years before the Civil War begins, April 12, 1861. Senator Henry L. Wilson became a leading voice for the abolition of slavery during the U.S. Civil War. Okay. So make a long story short, the bill passes the House, passes the Senate. Okay. And then the President Abraham Lincoln signs it into law, April 16th, 1862. The bill freed enslaved people in the District of Columbia and compensated slave owners up to $300 for each person, you know, that they own that was being set free. Now, the Hartford Daily Courant, Courant, celebrated that, quote, not a slave exists in their shackles have fallen, never to be restored, quote. In the months following the enactment of the law, commissioners approved more than 930 petitions granting freedom to 2,989 formerly enslaved people. DC Emancipation Day has been celebrated in the District of Columbia since 1862. Just 5 months later, September 1862, we know that was the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, September 22nd, 1862. The Emancipation Proclamation was a military strategy that Lincoln used, and the purpose was to bring the South back into the Union. Okay. All right. Now, so read this here at Senate.gov. Senate.gov is the official website of the U.S. Senate. So there are 80 to 100 articles that we look at in the class. We go deep into this history. Okay. And in the second class that I teach on Sundays, we have that class starting up in June. Black resistance movements from the Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, Black Power Movement, 1800 to 1968. We focus in on that period of history and get deep into this history also. Okay. All right. Now, so we look at things like Juneteenth briefly to dispel some of these myths. Be sure to follow us here on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep. Follow us on our social media platforms as well, on Twitter and Instagram. We have the information here on the homepage of our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can also register for the 10-week online history course that I teach, where we deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. This is a class that I created the curriculum. I've been teaching it since 2017 on and off. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. So the class is discounted to $60. We're going to do about 12 class sessions, including the first session, which was an overview. We have the class lesson plan here for all 10 or 11 class sessions as well. So you can see the type of content that we cover. You can download the class lesson plans here as well. So we deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. We look at some ancient African civilizations, not just ancient Kemet, but also Kush, Ethiopia. We look at Great Zimbabwe. We look at Hannibal Barca and Carthage. We talk about the African Moors as well. We have a preview of the class here also. So you can register for it. Click right here to register for the class. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded, so you can go back and watch it anytime. So a year from now, 2 years from now, you have full access. You can go back and watch the entire course. Okay. Our next classes are Saturday, April 6th, Saturday, April 13th, April 20th, April 27th, 2024. And we do the classes usually 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We may have one last class session after April 27th. We have to see how much we can cover. Okay. But as soon as you register, you can start watching the content. And we're going to post the link right here, so you can start watching it right now as soon as you register for the class. The content is PG-13, so you can use this with your children. There are 80 to 100 articles that we reference in the class. There's like 15 books. You don't have to buy any books to follow along in class. And we talk about this here in the lesson plan. Okay. We can't start studying our history in slavery. Even when we study the transatlantic slave trade, which is important, we can't start in 1619 or the 1440s. When the Portuguese get involved, we have to deal with hundreds of years, deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors, also deal with some of the history of the Khoisan who go all around the world. There are 200 slides, over 200 slides that I put together in our PowerPoint presentation that we'll look at. There are 80 to 100 articles that we'll reference. So I picked out the articles. There are 15 books that we reference. So we show you excerpts of the book on the screen. You don't have to buy any of the books if you don't want to. They're good for your library if you want to. Also, we'll look at excerpts of interviews that I've done with some of our scholars, like Professor James Small, Professor Kabahai Kamene, Anthony Browder, Tony Browder, who wrote Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization and Egypt on the Potomac. We use those two books. Those are two of the books we use in the class. Also, we'll look at excerpts of interviews that I've done with Runoko Rashidi and some other scholars also. Okay, so We do the sessions live. All the sessions are recorded. You can go back and watch it anytime. All right. That's Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave